healthy and prosperous 2021. We've seen a lot of changes, and on the one hand, some things are moving quickly, and I'm sure everybody can attest to other days things seem to move very slow. So here's to a good pace in 2021. Looking forward to hearing to what Mr. Barrett says this morning. So just a intro for Mr. Barrett. Before his election to the House of Commons, Michael Barrett served in the Canadian Armed Forces as a happy Wednesday morning, telecommunication lineman. During his time in the CAF, Michael was posted to CFB Edmonton and participated in domestic operations, including at CFS Alert in Canada's High Arctic. After serving in the Canadian Armed Forces, Michael worked as a human resource manager for a company operating a dozen Tim Horton restaurants with more than 400 employees, all while serving as a municipal councillor in the township at Edwardsburg Cardinal. As a councillor, Michael chaired the Public Works and Environmental Services Committee, sat on the Port of Johnstown Management Board as well. Michael resides in Brockville with his wife Amanda and their 5 children. And thank you, Michael, for your Christmas card. Oh my God, they were so cute. And your brand new baby, I'm sure, doing very well. How precious is that? I love those pictures. Michael is the Member of Parliament for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes, where he was elected in a by-election on December 3rd, 2018, with 58% of the vote. Good morning, Michael, and looking forward to hearing your news.
Well, good morning. Thanks very much for that introduction and for the kind words about the Christmas card. Some pretty exciting times in my house with the arrival of number 5. It's shocking for Amanda and I to hear that we have 5 kids. And it is also shocking when you hear 5 of them in the house, as I can hear them thundering around upstairs. I'm at home right now. And so there were some good things that came out of last year, for sure. My little Nathan is one of them. We also saw a lot of the best side of our community in some very, very challenging times. If I can take you back to last March, we were supposed to get together for my update, which was ultimately canceled because of this COVID-19 thing. I was expecting that it would be rescheduled initially, and then we really got an idea of the scope and the effect of the pandemic on our daily way of life and on our community. So while it's been a tough year for a number of reasons, one of the challenges that we have as a community is that we don't have the opportunity to connect and keep each other updated on what's going on. So I want to thank the Chamber and their partners for giving us this opportunity today. I know that there'll be an opportunity for questions, so I should speak for about 55 minutes, leave about 4 minutes for questions, 1 minute for a wrap up, and we'll be done. I won't talk for that long, I'm just joking. And I do want to touch quickly on the regional relief and recovery fund that is very important with our partners from the CFDCs. So please do reach out. That tranche of support is really important. And though I have all of these preliminary remarks I wanted to make, I'm just going to get right into it. One of the biggest hurdles that some organizations in our community have had, businesses in our community have had, is that they haven't been able to access funding. And there's a couple reasons, but the most, I don't know, I guess disappointing, the most disappointing reason that they weren't able to access funding that we've encountered in my office is because people haven't asked, and then they've closed their business and they didn't know that there were funds available, so they didn't ask. And it wasn't like they saw that there was this pot of money sitting over here and said, well, I'm not going to ask about it. That's for someone else. They didn't know. And so for all of the effort that government is going to, and that the chamber is going to, to promote the recovery benefits that are available, people don't know about all of them. And so do promote them. And when you're talking to someone who's an entrepreneur, ask them if they've applied. Encourage them to apply. Lots of folks will tell us, well, I know I'm not eligible for that. You know you're not eligible because you applied, because you read the criteria, or because someone told you that. Well, I just know. I heard that. So we want people to apply. We want people to talk to their bank. We want people to talk to my office. We want them to work with the chamber, to work with the Thousand Islands CDC, the Grenville CFDC. We want everyone to come out of this on the other side in good shape. So it's really important that people do seek out the programs that are available. One of the other challenges and the frustrations with this process, of course, is that some of the programs leave people out. People that should be included, they're left out. And we saw over the course of last year the evolution of some of these programs. The rent relief program comes to mind, and the wage subsidy. The wage subsidy has really been a tremendous lifeline for a lot of businesses, and likewise for members in our community. Now, I'm particularly fond of the concept of the wage subsidy because it keeps people working. So when we're not in a province-wide shutdown, as many people as possible are still going to work, and that's the preference of most members in our community. They want to work, they want to contribute, they want all of the benefits that go along with that, the socialization, the dignity that comes with us doing our job, making our contribution to our community, to business, and to civic life. So so that's really important. When that program was initially rolled out, and it was for 10%, it was going to be a 10% wage subsidy. I'd like to highlight at this point my role as a member of the official opposition. Now, our constitutional job is just that. We're there to be a challenge to the government, to push them to be a check. And credit where credit is due. There was, particularly in the early stages of the pandemic, extremely a good cooperation between ministers and members and all parties in the House of Commons. So there were some programs that rolled out very quickly, and we were able to appeal based on the evidence and the feedback from folks in the community to the better angels of the government on a few items. One of them is the wage subsidy, and I'm very happy to hear from other opposition parties that they also want to share the credit for increasing that from 10 to 75%. I think that's a tremendous outcome. And the government took the good advice and implemented a 75% wage subsidy. So that's the right thing to do. So then they moved quickly on that. Again, credit where credit is due. One of the frustrations that I know members of our community have had, and that I have as your representative, is where the government has chosen not to move quickly. And the rent relief is one of those. I know that was a source of great frustration for people that are on this call, as well as people who I've spoken with on the phone and had the rare occasion to see in person over the last year. So now that program has been modified, and we'll touch quickly on some of the programs at the end of my remarks. And I'll list those key programs, but I do just want to encourage folks to check the status of them. Go to canada.ca, see where these programs are at. Call my office, speak to Randy, he's on the call today, and just ask how they think they might fit in. It's also important to talk to your financial institution and see where they're at, challenge them, because we will continue to advocate for cooperation from the big banks. they need to feel the pressure locally. Your biggest advocate is going to be your account manager or your branch manager to the bank. If the VPs at the bank are getting a lot of pressure, it's one thing for whoever the CEO and the VPs are in Toronto to think, well, this is what we're going to do. The people that you work with, your lender, is usually someone in the bank that lives, on your street. These are members of our community. They have a vested interest in the success of our region. So we want to make sure that they get the message as well, that cooperation that was in some cases a little slow to come through, no fault of local branches, of course, that needs to continue in some form. Let me just skip through some of my notes here, because I haven't read any of them. We were able to pass a motion prior to Christmas stopping audits of small businesses. That was a frustration that I heard, and allowed for some more flexibility, like I said, with the rent and wage subsidies and other support programs, including increases to the emergency business account. One of the sectors in our community that we see a lot of, because they're really good at what they do, and I've had the opportunity to make the rounds with the United Way and the Brockville and Area Community Foundation. We've seen the important work they do and the need that has been increased during this time. So let me just, to make sure that I stay on point here, I'm going to share my screen with you. Can you see that okay, Pam? We're good? Okay. I'm just going to show you another picture of myself for a few minutes. No, of course not. Shouldn't have left it to myself to set that up, I guess, right? Hey, there we go. So my focus has been small businesses, of course, and the rent subsidy that I spoke about has been improved. The shotgun of information that you're seeing on your screen, that's available on Canada.ca, but you can also call my office. We're happy to help you figure out if you qualify, if it makes sense for you. But those changes now allow, of course, for the tenant to make the application and not to have to deal through the landlord, which was a real hurdle and a barrier to entry for many. It required the participation of the landlord. So do engage with that, and I'll put an asterisk here as well. There are multiple programs. There's a suite of programs available federally. There are also provincial support programs available. So I'm not going to cover provincial programs today, but I can tell you that MPP Clark's office will help guide you in accessing those programs as well. So do encourage people that you're speaking with to contact my office, to contact Steve's office, and to make sure that they are unlocking some of the relief that's available. The CEBA has had some increases. So it was originally $40,000. It's a top up of $20,000 on top of that now, and that is 50% forgivable if repaid by the end of 2022. And there is actually I'm not sure if it's on the screen. There's a deadline, an application deadline of March 31st. So you do want to heed that opportunity. This is something that you can work with your bank on, but of course, more information is available at canada.ca/coronavirus or by speaking to my office. The wage subsidy extended until June of this year. Like I said, this program was 75% of wages covered if you meet the qualifying criteria. It has been a lifeline, a real saving grace for a lot of businesses. Initially, and I'll just say that in March of last year, the initial position of the official opposition was to task the government to return an amount equal to all federal tax remittances for a period of not less than 12 months. and it just would have allowed government to directly return that money to businesses instead of having, a patchwork of programs. Again, the government chose a different way to act initially. We wanted to do it in such a way that it wasn't going to be repayable like 50% of the CEBA. We didn't want there to have to be demonstration of business loss. We just wanted right across the board equally for people to be able to get that relief because they needed the help. Of course, that some businesses have fared better. Their business models, the way that they're structured, allows them to continue to operate during the pandemic. But putting more money on the table then allows them to put more money in the pockets of their employees. For example, if they're an essential business, and to make sure there's less of a burden on customers. So these programs are what we're working with. And again, I really encourage folks to look at the qualifying criteria for the wage subsidy and to be sensitive to those deadlines. There is an awful lot that my office can help with. Getting people, if they're looking to apply late to a program, I think that would be that would be swimming against the current for us for sure. So ask sooner, not later. And I want to touch on two items. The funding that we've been able to provide through the Community Foundation and the United Way has really been fantastic. Donations, of course, have dropped in a lot of ways. And while people have opened up their wallet, we often open up our wallets when there's an opportunity to do so through fundraising activities, through drives that charitable organizations do. And so while Trish and Eric are working as our other community partners to make sure that we do have the funding that we need and increase funding in some cases, there is a challenge. There is a need to supplement that. We do want members of our community to continue to give, but we are going to need to see the government. We're going to need to see the government find a way to at least temporarily structure relief for these vital organizations. And when we're spending the sums of money that we are as a country, and the federal government alone will book close to $400 billion in deficit spending this year, pushing us over $1 trillion in national debt. We want to make sure that we have something to show for it when we come out the other side, and we need to make sure that just the pictures that are on the screen, and I know there's a list there as well. But when you talk about services for youth who've been at home, who are particularly at-risk youth who would be accessing these services, we need to make sure that they're connected. We need to make sure you look at the food bank that people are fed. We need to the work of the group. Refugees for Brockville. We see that none of those needs have changed to a lesser degree during the pandemic, but in fact have increased, and we've really seen their need amplified. So we want to make sure that there is a way that they come through this on the other side, but also all of the people who rely on their services come through it as well. Not listed here is we've also there's a program that Interval House was able to access. Again, my suggestion on the funds that Interval House is able to access is that perhaps some of that funding become a structured program expense instead of an annual application for that. We've seen a tremendously sad rise in the need of those services, and people need to know that they're available to them. So one of the other symptoms of this pandemic, of course, and our legions are a gathering place in lots of the communities throughout Leeds, Grenville, Islands and Rideau Lakes, including in Brockville. we heard from Legions very quickly that being closed was a death blow to many of them. And there are many Legions across Canada that have closed, and there are more that will close. I know that to be sure, as a result of not being able to open. So I intervened on a number of occasions, as did my colleagues, with the minister directly, and we've pushed for this. I spoke in the House of Commons on this and addressed questions to the minister for funding. And so pleased that it has arrived, and this is going to allow them to keep the lights on. So this is important as we look at what our community is going to look like on the other side. We still need these points. Our Legions serve a number of different purposes in different communities, and we want to make sure that all of those they're able to fulfill their mandate when we come out of COVID-19. So is my screen share off there, Pam? Yeah, great. And true to form, I have committed to speaking for a short period of time and have talked longer than I wanted to. So I will stop there. I'm pleased to take your questions. I share the concern, the concerns and frustrations of many of you that have expressed them to me to this point. I do think that we need to make sure that we continue to collaborate in 2021 in a way that allows us to stay on our front foot as much as possible. And I do need the suggestions. The improvements that were made to programs like the wage subsidy, like the rent relief program, the calls for funding for the charitable sector, these came as a direct result of feedback that members of Parliament from across Canada heard from their constituents. And there are changes and even eligibility criteria. One was to the emergency business account, for example. I intervened with the minister on a point on one criteria, and it had the effect of the straw that broke the camel's back. I was not the first member who had raised the issue with the small business minister, Minister Ng. But after MPs had carried the ball all the way down the field, I carried it that last inch into the end zone for the touchdown because of feedback that we heard from our community. And so that's not to take credit for the change. Like I said, all of the work was done by MPs from all parties, and ministering, she kind of said, like, this is too much now. And again, credit where credit is due, responded to the concerns of the communities across Canada and made the change. If I didn't hear from the folks that are on this call and folks that are in our community, change wouldn't have been made, and more people would have been left out of that program, and we would have seen the more devastating effects of this pandemic on community and on businesses. So please do provide that feedback. It really is essential to this process. I did say that at the beginning, the cooperation between everyone in the House of Commons was really remarkable. It's still better than in regular times. It's not quite to the level where a minister wants to chat with a backbench opposition member about the concerns in our community, but I can carry the message, and certainly I do get a personal response from them on that. I think the longer we can stay away from an election, the more we can get done for our community. So we're not seeking an opportunity for an election this year. So time for questions.
Perfect. Thank you, Michael. And you're absolutely right. Collaboration is key to keeping our community strong. And I think our community has done a really fabulous job working together, different organizations, and working with all levels of government. So we did, yes, absolutely had some advanced questions. So I'll do them first. And I see that the chat box, there's some questions in there. Rob actually put a question in there that was on the advanced question. So thanks, Rob, for putting that in the chat. So the first advanced question, international borders. With the land borders closed from the US to Canada, and they have been for quite a long time, why haven't there been better COVID protocols in place in the airports within Canada? And we saw that at Christmas time. And we saw that at the beginning you know, in March when this all started and everybody went off to March break and then, so, and we know that there's rapid testing components or units. So just if you would be able to answer that question or have some insight on that.
Sure, and I won't belabor this point, but I will say that it's, I, along with my colleagues, have been very clear since last spring about the need for stronger border measures. We see it directly here with the closed land border. That has not been the case with air travel, and it's been that way since day one. And we've said that that's unacceptable. And should air travel, non-essential air travel, continue, there had to be strict protocols in place almost a year ago. And now we have flights coming into Canada. You can see this on Health Canada's website, where they're reporting 100% of the travelers exposed to COVID, and then they get off the plane. And so this is in January. So, you know, we're 10 months into this thing. So like I said, I won't belabor the point. We continue to call for action on this. We can't expect a different result, and we can't have everybody locked down and in this shutdown scenario if our borders are open by air travel for non-essential travel. And there are testing options available. There are rapid testing options available. There is some progress being made there, but really it's not. I will note for everyone though that yesterday the Prime Minister did advise Canadians, and this, if you remember last March, he made a couple statements. It's time to come home. It's time to come home. It's time to come home. And then all of a sudden borders closed all around the world, and then we had to initiate a repatriation effort for folks even from this community, from countries that were locked down under martial law, etc. Yesterday, the Prime Minister advised Canadians not to leave. So I think that there could be more restrictions coming as far as travel goes, but you can't bank on that. So the post-arrival testing is necessary. Having a clear COVID test in advance is important, but very limited use of rapid testing has been deployed at airports, and leisure travel continues. And so I think that we're going to continue to see a problem as long as that goes on. And it's a challenge. We've heard from the Premier that he would like action on that, and I agree. So the land border is going to remain closed by all indications to non-essential travel for the foreseeable future as well.
Perfect. Yeah, and it is frustrating, and just on the news yesterday, they were taking a glimpse of the Ottawa airport, and you see that it's down, but you know it's still open, and there's a concern there. So thank you for that. Tax season is amongst us. The federal government is looking at, as a federal government, looking at any relief for tax debt or HST debt for businesses, especially small businesses.
Not that I'm aware of. The taxpayer relief provisions that are available, they're on the CRA website. The only changes to taxation that I'm aware of for this year is a payroll tax increase on January 1st and the increase to the carbon tax. Excuse me. So we asked the government to delay tax increases for January or for this year. So we know that that's going to be a burden. We're going to have to find ways, the government's going to have to find ways to offset those burdens that are being put on businesses at the most challenging time. But the short answer is that there has been no relief, no further relief measures prescribed at this time.
Okay. With CEBA, as of December 4th, as you indicated, CEBA was increased from 40,000 to 60,000. Has the government looked at extending the repayment date for the forgivable portion?
So that's something that I can certainly take back to my colleagues and to advocate for, if that's something that folks think would be helpful. I think that the eligibility criteria can always use a second look. And let me read Rob's question live here in the chat. With no revenue coming in facilities. Yeah, so yes, so the eligibility for that could be revisited for cases like that. And so Rob, if you wanted to articulate, and to anyone, if you want to articulate a particular change and the rationale for that change, and you want to send it to me, it's michael.barrett@parl.gc.ca. And is that on my, no, it's not on my screen. I won't share that. So that my email address would have been much more helpful to put on the screen than a picture of my face. So I apologize for that. But please do share that rationale with me, and that's great. It's really hard to argue with the experts. You are the experts in all of your different fields, so so please do provide that feedback.
Perfect. So around the vaccination. So there has been many different dates for the vaccination. Do you have any information on timing for most Canadians receiving the vaccination? I know that there's, lots of media coverage on it, and just want to see if we know the truth of what that is at this point in time.
I'm trying not to be overly negative on this point. We're not as a country in comparison to many others. We are not doing as well as we should be on vaccines. You'll hear from the government they have secured a supply of vaccines that exceeds the number of Canadians who would be vaccinated. However, it's the time that we will receive them. And so the government maintains that every Canadian who wants a vaccination, the federal government maintains that every Canadian who wants to be vaccinated against COVID-19 will be able to receive their first dose by September of this year. But there have been pretty significant challenges that the government's been presented with since then, including that Pfizer has announced that next week we will receive 0 doses of the vaccine that we've purchased. The government says they bought, they've optioned an additional order of those, but again, that's going to come later in the year. So the timelines are going to be a challenge, and we are going to continue to press the government on this. And I do hope that folks understand that we have seen time and time again in 2020 that when the opposition parties have done their job, it elicits a response from the government. And so we've seen that on a number of issues, and it happens slower than I would like, but it does happen. So on vaccines, we want the government to get it right. I want Justin Trudeau to have the successful vaccine distribution to the provinces feather in his cap. There's absolutely nothing I want more than that, because those vaccines mean that we are going to be able to reopen our country from coast to coast. It means that we're going to be able to start seeing that real sense of normalcy, and that every time we hit a major road bump like we did with this Pfizer issue for next week, that gets pushed a little further away. That light at the end of the tunnel gets pushed a little further. So we're going to push the government on that, but to get a better outcome. That is the reason why we want that vaccination piece done. And I know that our provincial representative Steve Clark is certainly doing his part to advocate on our behalf. And so the short answer is I don't know. The phases are listed on the government's website. Outside of the healthcare workers and folks in congregate living settings, many folks on this call would fall into the second phase of the rollout, and we do hope that is mid-year, but at this time it's really tough to put a number on that, and the government needs to push Pfizer a little harder. I thought it was super unfortunate that during a pandemic, when we're vaccinating people, that Pfizer announces that every other country is having their full or 75% of their vaccine distribution next week as planned, and Canada's getting 0%. And in the same day, Pfizer announced that they're asking Canada for a tax break. And so that might create a bit of cynicism and might upset people. We're just going to keep pushing. So so you can count on our medical officer of health locally and the province to keep pushing. I know that the premier yesterday even asked the incoming U.S. president, President-elect Biden, to unlock some doses from the U.S. because 100% of doses manufactured in the U.S. are being used in the United States. Now they have shortages there as well, but he is, I just think it's important to note that they are looking for creative solutions.
That's great. Yeah, because you're right. This is key to feeling a little normalcy in our worlds today. And so hopefully we can keep on pressuring. And if you need our help, we'll pressure too. So around that vaccination, I know that there's been rumblings. I know that there's not concrete or anything, but for us as the chamber and an organization, we do a lot of events and we do a lot of big events. So our concern or our question, and I'm sure you probably don't have the answer for this, but because it's been just kind of rumbling around there, but do you think that there might be some type of like passport, such as like when the children go to school, they have to produce that they've had all these vaccinations to have entry into school, to larger events? Just so we put our head around in our programming committee that when we're looking in the future for our events, is that something that the government's discussing?
So the Prime Minister has said no. So that answers that question from the federal perspective. Now, if the First Ministers all get together, if the premiers align and say that they're going to do it, well then it'll happen. But that it seems unlikely that there would be that kind of national passport for demonstrating a vaccination. It is something that the province of Ontario could do. I'm not sure where the province is on that. Have you had your update with Steve yet?
No, actually, that's February 1st.
Well, on February 1st, I do encourage you to ask the minister, and I'll tune in to hear his answer.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the Prime Minister has ruled it out.
Okay, yeah, and that good point, because I just actually wrote that down, that I want to have that on some questions for MPP clerks. So thank you for that. So the other question is, this one's from Rob. With the pandemic closures that have eroded yearly revenues, the charitable sector and childcare sector face a great deal of uncertainty. What is the plan or position to addressing supporting these vital organizations that support our community's well-being? With funding dollars expected to be lower and increased costs associated with the new protocols and PPE requirements, is there a plan to introduce continual funding?
So the short answer is that I'm not sure, Rob, because we haven't had a good look at what the government's planning for budget 2021. And the government, as I said, credit where credit is due. There has been some fast action and some responsiveness to necessary changes to the programs that have been rolled out. One criticism that I will register is that we hear about these programs not during their creation and not at giving us an opportunity to give input and to gather feedback from the sector and folks like yourself. But after it's been announced, and they look for, and of course, you want relief right away. We want relief right away. So the government seeks to pass it basically within 24 hours of the opposition having seen it, all opposition parties. And so the opportunity for us to give feedback is very limited. So I don't know what the plan is for continuing that support. I can tell you that based on our conversations and based on your advocacy, I have registered that with the government, and I'll continue to. But to this point, I haven't seen a plan.
Yeah, I guess if I could just add, Pam, if this is okay, with the emergency response funding that we got through the federal government, and not just us, but other organizations, it came at a very crucial time, but that was kind of like a one-time, here you go. And as we're remodeling our reopening, nothing's going to come back 100% right away. So as a charity locally, we're looking at like a 2 to 5 year back to normal ramp up. And without sector stabilization funding, there's going to be many charities, not just the Y, but there's going to be many charities that will not be able to sustain itself. And then that responsibility falls to who? And I guess if I was to advocate for you to go back to your counterparts, it is that, because there was talk of making childcare more affordable and more accessible, and they're all great ideas, but someone still has to deliver it. And you know, locally, there are not, I'll speak just for the Y, there is a level of risk that long time organizations that have been serving the area are very much at risk without sector stabilization, and not infrastructure dollars. I don't need money to put into my building. I need money to replace the fundraising dollars and the revenue dollars that I'm not going to see probably for another 3 to 5 years.
Yep, a message received loud and clear, Rob. And,
good morning, Michael.
Good morning, and yep, your message is received, and I will communicate it again. It's not lost on me the importance of the community organizations. Like I said before, and we could talk about the increased need for the charitable sector that we've seen during COVID, and the Y is certainly a great example of that. So you can count on my advocacy.
Thanks, Rob, for clarifying more on that too. So appreciate that. And thanks, Michael. Jan has a few questions that came in at later on after we sent the agenda out to Michael. So Jan, would you be able to ask those questions of Michael?
Yep, I can. And then there are questions in the chat box as well.
Yes, I saw that. Thank you.
Okay, so the first one, with the pandemic, closures that have eroded yearly revenues, the charitable sector and the childcare sector faces a great deal of uncertainty. What's the plan or position to address?
That was the one that Rob we just spoke of. Sorry, Jan.
Okay, sorry, I'm going back and forth between questions, so I'm missing part of this.
You can have an answer again, make sure it's the same answer.
I was told there wouldn't be a test.
Okay. Why are banks not extending leniency to customers at this time around? Banks made an overwhelming profit in 2020, and yet now when folks are forced to close up shop once again, so many are out of work, and banks are actually foreclosing on companies and families, and you know, not giving them any leniency with mortgage payments or car payments, stuff like that. Is there any way that we can force the banks to adhere?
Yeah, the federal government does wield quite a bit of power with banks, but the short answer is I want to make sure that everyone who's experiencing those challenges has first made sure that that they've talked to our CFDC, they've spoken to my office to make sure that they've unlocked all of the money that they can get their hands on. That's the easy part. So let's do that first. That is so important. If anyone tells me my office is harder to deal with than a bank, then oh boy, Randy, you're going to sweat. But with respect to the banks, as I said, present your individual situation to your branch manager or to your account manager, and communicate to my office the type of situation. Now, if the chamber's hearing from folks, this is we've heard this from a couple of people, we've heard this from someone. Communicate that to me, and I will feed that in. I can tell you that our shadow minister for finance, Pierre Poilievre, is he's not shy on this issue in dealing with the Minister of Finance, and Minister Freeland is Deputy Prime Minister Freeland is receptive to feedback. So we need to make sure that she's getting the information. If we're seeing that banks are not acting in the best interests of our community, then the federal government ought to apply pressure to them. So in the general context, I can raise that issue. If there are specific examples, please let me know and let my office know, and we'll of course, as always, protect the confidentiality of that information. But we also need to get this information before they're closing the doors. I mean, they're not going to roll back a foreclosure. I expect that would be unlikely. But looking for programs, looking for structure, so that we can give people that breathing room on the front end. I think that's a bit easier to do. So please provide me with more information, and I will advocate specifically on that. But in general on the topic, I will raise it with Pierre Poilievre, to raise with Deputy Prime Minister Freeland. She's the Minister of Finance, and we'll see if we can't make some headway.
Okay, the other question is kind of all over the place, but it's the general gist of it is based on how is it decided what are essential services? Because there's a lot of businesses open around town. For example, car dealerships. People don't understand, why is a car dealership an essential service? Why is that open?
So the designation of essential services is done by the province. And so this is a good February 1st question. And for MPP Clark. So let me just pass the buck. So his ears are burning wherever he is. But we need to make sure that there is a suite of programs available and relief available to all businesses. And when we have folks who are forced open, or they're declared essential, and therefore it puts them in a complicated position with their employees, and meeting payroll while not meeting their cash flow needs, we need to make sure that we have programs that are available to help them with that. That's why that 75% wage subsidy does get us part of the way there. But if you're able to pay them 75%, if you only have to pay them 25%, but you're making 0% or 5% or 10% of your revenue, that's not a sustainable trajectory for businesses. For most businesses, I don't think too many folks operate with profit margins in excess of that, where they can just write off 5, 10, 15, 25%. So it's a good question for Steve, but we again want to make sure that we're unlocking all of the programs that are available. And if there's a specific measure, a sector specific relief, because again, the folks on this call are the experts. We have people from food processing, we have people in retail, we have people in in the car sales business. What you're hearing from your industry, please do advocate for yourself to my office as well. I don't meet with lobbyists as generally speaking, but I'll meet with any of you anytime. So please do share that. Please do share that feedback with me. The weight of a conversation from one of you with me when I raise it with the National Conservative Caucus, so the other 120 Conservative MPs, the weight of a story about your organization or your business is much more profound than me saying, oh, I met with X from X consulting shop, and that's not personal. They know, my colleagues know, government members know, ministers know, people like you in their communities, and we want them to go back and ask someone in their community, is this what you're experiencing too? And when that's affirmed, that's how we get the change.
Okay. that was the end of my pre-submitted ones there. Did you want me to go ahead and read the questions out that are in the box?
Yeah, there's a couple. Some of them have been answered. And then if Darren wouldn't mind, I know Darren put something in the chat box about the confusion with the SEBA. And I don't know, Darren, do you feel comfortable talking about that, or do you want me to just read off, or people can see what's in the, and you know, and funny enough, there was confusion last week when SEBA, you know, the extension and hearing about it and other community partners sending it out. And then they said, well, that's with the CDCs and the CFDCs have changed. So I was right on the phone with Tom Russell to say, I think they're two different programs, and sometimes they mimic a little bit to the same, but they are two different programs. Correct, Darren?
Yeah, that's correct. So obviously they very much mirror each other. You know, I guess a disappointment on my side is it takes so long for us to mirror what, you know, SEBA's doing. Like, you know, SEBA's been out with 60,000 for a long time. I don't know when we're going to be able to launch that. Hopefully soon, if it's coming. You know, so once we hear on that, then obviously we can move forward. We've always seemed to have mimicked, but it takes a while. So, but I guess that my other question is more around the SEBA grant, and there is some confusion around that, I think, because if you actually, so I pulled this actually off of the SEBA website, and if somebody moves from 40,000 to 60, their terms and conditions have changed, which hopefully, you know, most people don't read all of the fine print when they're doing this. They go ahead and do it, and then they find out, well, it's probably going to be 2 years down the road when they go to pay $30,000 to get their first $10,000 granted, and thinking they're going to have a $20,000 loan where they didn't get a $10,000 grant. So it like I say, the SEBA website is quite clear that, for example, if you had 40 and you increase to 60, but you only pay 30, you're not getting that $10,000 grant. So I guess that should be something I think that should be revisited. It sounds like some potential banks might be doing, or institutions might be doing, two separate loans so that they can say, okay, yeah, you get, if the $40,000 loan, you pay your 30, you get your granted portion on that, and then we work with the 20. Others are doing all 60, and they're going to run into this situation. Others are doing, you're approved for this amount, use what you need. It's a mishmash of different things. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I will leave that with you.
Well, thanks, Darren, and thanks for the work that you're doing as well, helping people navigate the programs. So yeah, this is one of those things where there's not that uniformity that would serve us well and make it easy for us to explain to people. And also, some of the rules, you can tell that these rules were not written by business people. You can tell that these were written by you know, people who never have run a small business and kept their own books and so that scenario that you've laid out is not one that I was dialed into. So and the answer, of course, is for, you know, for banks to when they're the lender, to roll it out in a way that that makes the most sense, that allows for the spirit of the program to be honored. And so that perhaps is a screw that can get tightened down, and I'll raise that change, because I would expect more changes to the SEBA program in 2020.
Thank you. Sorry, it's that unmute thing. But we did pretty good today. Everybody unmuted, so we weren't kind of doing our talk. So there was one other question that came from Jamal. Looking beyond the pandemic, what initiatives are being discussed to boost tourism in and mitigation to the region? I know on a provincial level, Lisa McLeod's been doing like crazy stuff and helping some industry, but this industry sector has been really hit hard. And of course, you know, and we don't know when that will reopen because of tourism is gathering.
Yeah, it's a great question, one to which I'm not sure what the government is going to do. The need is obvious, and it's felt acutely here in our region, and the effect varies across the country. So I can tell you that I have advocated certainly for the sector, and we do have really strong champions for it. One of them is Blake Richards. He has been pushing for years for stability for the sector, but no one could have predicted the volatility of hospitality and tourism in 2020 and now what we expect for 2021. So it is something that we're aware of, and the need for support. I think support is probably a better word when we talk about relief. I don't know that sometimes that this patchwork of programs leaves people with the relief. We all feel a great amount of anxiety, and folks in the tourism and hospitality sector, unfortunately, don't enjoy the same. They don't enjoy some of the same benefits that I think some southern destinations have throughout, where people have continued to travel there, while we haven't been, of course, and rightfully accepting international travelers, and nor would we want them through our region. But it's something that we're aware of. It's something that we're going to continue to push for, and we want to make sure that there is that support, that stability that's provided to the sector, because it makes up an important fabric in our region.
Perfect. I have Dane Fellows that would like to ask a question. So Dane, if you wanted to unmute your microphone and go ahead and ask the question.
Good morning, everybody. Hi, Michael. Thanks for joining us. Just adding on to the previous question that Janet asked you in regards to, pressure from the federal government on the big banks. At one time when this all kind of rolled out, it was all very clear to people if they needed the assistance, mortgage deferrals, interest-only payments, car loan deferrals, and you kind of answered from a business perspective, but from being in the automotive industry, I do receive phone calls, and maybe somebody wasn't affected previously, but they are affected now, and they do need that deferral. They want to put their car loan on hold, or they're currently in default status, but it doesn't appear the banks are, if they're actually being told those programs have ended, the offering is not there. On the business example specifically, there's a Smith Falls business named the Wonton Crunch, who I read just recently in an article, is on foreclosure, and it's the difference between making that principal and interest payment. Bank curtailment specifically in my business were withheld. Now, I haven't required it at this time, and I hope that I don't, but should I, I don't know that it's an application process. Should it not be easier for people that need it to not go through the hoops and just have that there and available for people when they need it? Because maybe they weren't affected before, but they're affected now, and maybe they don't need it for 6 months. Maybe they just need it for 2 months.
Yeah, thanks for the question and the perspective, Dane. And you're absolutely right. And so, as I said earlier, the relationship that businesses and consumers have with their financial institutions is one that I think is going to require some attention again, and one that I commit to raising with the Shadow Minister for Finance. We need to be aware of the ongoing financial impact, and certainly the first business to return to normal or to really improve their financial standing should not be ones who are doing it at the expense of others. And so I like I said before, a great champion for local businesses, for individuals dealing with their personal finances, will be the relationship they have with a branch manager or their account manager at their local bank. That's who's going to put pressure on VPs who don't live in our community. These people who work in these banks in our towns, they're our neighbors. So that's so I think that's important to note. When I talk about banks, I'm not talking about the person down the street who works at the bank. The banks as an institution, they do have to play their role as a part of our community, as a part of our society, and recognize the extraordinary times that we're in. And they need to, they have to make money. They're a business. That's fine, but it can be done in such a way that it doesn't place a disproportionate burden. It doesn't injure people during this extraordinary situation, a global pandemic. So it does require a second look, and it is something that I will examine and I'll push.
Thanks, Dane. Thanks, Michael. One more question, and then just for the purpose of timing, and I don't want to take up too much of Michael's time. He's a busy man and probably has more Zoom calls like we all have to get onto. But this one, Tian wrote, and I has come through our office too. What about new businesses that opened in 2020? If they have no comparison in revenue for 2019, is there any room for them to apply for the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy? And can employers apply for this for new hires?
So for individual situations, we've seen with a few programs, not specifically the wage subsidy though, that if folks are close to meeting the requirements, and this might be and looking to, and part of the reason the regional development agencies were engaged is, of course, we know that they're really good at understanding the needs of our community. They're a local player. They're kind of a feet in the street approach, as opposed to banks reading rules written by lawyers and distributing and collecting funds based on that. The rules for the wage subsidy do present a real challenge for any entrepreneur who had targeted their business launch for last year, and through no fault of their own have now been excluded from eligibility for these programs. That criteria piece is something that we'll look at closing, finding solutions to present to the government to close that gap, because there has to be a way, and just sorry you got here too late is it's a heartbreaking response. So we and backbreaking and all the rest of it. So it is an issue that we'll raise. We haven't found a palatable solution to the government at this point, but do know that it is something that I'm live to. There are businesses in our community who've asked for our help with this, but do speak to my office. Do call and register your situation with my team, because we want to be able to see if there's another way that we can assist while we look to unlock an answer that makes sense for your business.
Wonderful. Yeah. And it is disheartening, and, but hopefully there will be a solution for those entrepreneurs that, they were on the cuff of opening and then, like you said, COVID hit and life has changed for all of us.
Yeah. That's not something you can write into a business plan.
Absolutely, absolutely. Can you, Wendy? Can you do that? So once again, thank you, Michael, for taking the time to speak to the membership. Really, really appreciate it. I'm sure there's going to be more questions. And like I said, Keely wrote it in the chat. If you have any questions, if there's anything of concern, if there's, questions around the loans, grants, we're trying to create a little bit of a hub, and hopefully we'll be able to announce that in the next couple of days on that for support for businesses. And we're here for you. So, just reach out to myself or Jan. I'm in the office some days, Jan's in the office. We're trying to be as safe as possible and not having, all three of us in the office, but we are here. We are still working from home and from the office for our members. So we really, really appreciate our members and all of that they're doing. And we're here to support. And once again, thank you, Michael, for your time. Just to remind people, we do have a couple of upcoming events, once again, on Zoom. So February 1st, MPP Steve Clark's update, and then March 22nd is Mayor Baker's update. And we do have in the works a few other Zoom calls that we're going to be putting out to our members. We just need to lock down those dates now. So.
And Pam, if I can, there was one question that I missed, and it was with respect to support for private education as well. There's increased demand for requirements for personal protective equipment. One thing that we pushed for last year was, first of all, which should be a benefit to virtually everyone who has a need to purchase PPE, is that there be no federal tax charged on personal protective equipment, just as a means of some relief. To be able to save the 5% is one measure, but that particular issue is not one that I've been presented with, and I do think that is something to liaise with our provincial government on, to ask that question to MPP Clark on the 1st. But the implementation of the 5% change in the tax, it's something that we proposed last year. It's something that I love it. I love when the government steals a good idea from the hardworking opposition to take the tax off of personal protective equipment, because it helps our community. And so there's no trademark on a good idea. So that's one way. But any other questions, please do contact my office, and I'm sure you'll get lots of insight from our great MPP when you talk to him on the 1st. And thank you so much for having me today. I hope I did answer some questions, but certainly it took a lot of notes, and I have lots of homework to keep working hard for our community, like you all work hard for us every day.
Great. Thank you again. Everybody have a wonderful day, and enjoy this wintry day. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.